Hi Enrico, welcome to Better Tech. Thank you so much for taking out the time today, and we're excited to talk about your business and get your insights around, e-commerce in today's episode. But before we dive into it, how about a quick introduction about yourself and what you do for our audience?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's a great honor. A bit of introduction about myself is I was born and raised in Milan from 1987, so I'm 33 years old this year. I started after my high school degree. I started studying at Bocconi. I started studying international management and business administration. And essentially, like my primary goal during my university years was to have as many experiences abroad as possible. So going outside of Italy, and I managed in my bachelor, I managed to go to the US at the University of Denver for a semester, which was a great opportunity to see how the US school system works. And then for my master's, I actually enrolled and got accepted into a program, a double degree program with China. So it was in between the University of Fudan in Shanghai and Milan. So I spent over a year at Fudan University, and I did my internship there in a factory actually in China, which was greatly interesting. And then I came back to Milan and graduated, and then started working. So I have a bit business background, I should say, and I focus a bit more I focused on finance in the last semesters of my education, and then I got accepted into a job at HSBC, one of those programs for newly graduates that lets you have rotations around different jobs, to get experience. And then after 2 years in banking, I decided to quit and to start my own business, and that's when I founded Velasca.
So when exactly did you found Velasca?
So it was 2013. I quit in November 2012 from my banking position, but I had been talking to my business partner Jacopo since the summer of 2012 about the idea, because actually there was like an episode that made us think about this business, which was I was living in Singapore at the time. I'd lived there for about 6 months when Jacopo came to visit me together with my brother. They're best friends, still now best friends.
Right.
And I asked him to buy a pair of loafers from a small shop in Milan, because I wanted to buy pair of nicely designed and well-made shoes, but I didn't want to overpay for them. Essentially,
Right.
I was an analyst in a banking corporation. I had a good salary, but I was not earning like millions, and if I could save 200, 300 euros on a pair of shoes, that's nice, because I can do more vacation, or I can go to the restaurant more often. And so essentially I asked him to buy these pair of loafers. And then when we started talking about our life and what we wanted to do, we actually used that as an example of, this is a gap in the market, right? Between the luxury shoes of the big international brands and the.
That's where the idea was really born.
Yeah, exactly. So we wanted to offer like a high quality, well designed, artisanal pair of shoes at an affordable price by betting on the business model of only selling direct to consumer. That's how it started.
Right. So how has it been going so far? And what would you say are the three building blocks of a consumer brand?
So it's been a great journey so far. Since 2013, we came from, we started with zero revenue, zero sales, and we ended up last year having 9 million euros in net revenues, with a team of 46 people, and now 10 shops, direct to consumer, but in the retail front. So we've kind of built a business, a nice business that before the pandemic was growing at high double digits year over year. So it was going nicely. The essentially, like, from with the benefit of hindsight, I can say that the one of the key factors for Velasca, actually I should say two key factors for Velasca, was on one side a clear value proposition, because from day one we never changed that. From day one we wanted to have the best of craftsmanship from Italy, and we focus on shoes, right? But this could apply to any other product that is well made. So the best of craftsmanship at affordable prices. So this is the clear value proposition, and the only way to do that was for us to go direct to consumer. So not have any kind of intermediation, no agents, no buyers, no distributors, no resellers. So it's just us and the final consumer, and that was one of the key factors. And the second key factor was attention to numbers, right? So in terms of the success, if I can say success, even though it's a subjective term, but the success of Velasca was really just having a clear strategy, executing it at the best of our abilities, which actually, thankfully, also we grew over time. So the first website, the first production, was not at the same level as it is today, of course. But executing that strategy in a clear manner to the consumer and having a great attention to numbers is really the two pillars of how we build this brand. And I should say, and I think this applies to any business, that you start from scratch. In terms of the branding exercise, so towards the consumer, not towards investors, I think the formula that everyone should bear in mind, and I'm a big believer in this. So you cannot communicate too many things. It's just a matter of we don't have enough attention to absorb 100 different things you're telling me.
Yep.
You have to have one clear value proposition, one clear communication point, and then you can add one or two, so 3 maximum in total, communication points to it. So for us, it was number one, high quality shoes, so artisanal shoes. So the shoes that you buy from Velasca are made by hand by people in Italy. So with centuries old expertise. That was the tradition part of our business. And then the number 2 that we added is a new and innovative business model that allows you to have those kind of high quality shoes at an affordable price. So those are the 2 pillars that we built the brand Velasca around. The third thing, which is more a visual kind of communication than a communication in terms of text and copywriting and messaging, is the style. So we have a specific style, and a specific consumer in mind. So we communicate through the clothes that we choose, through the shirts and the pants and everything. We communicate a specific kind of style. So it's a lifestyle that we go after.
So you seem like the type of person who give a lot of thought and attention to every single aspect of building up your brand, and which makes sense, right? You have a retail business. So, I'm guessing that, you set up your website on Shopify, so there must have also been a reason behind that. So how did you go with Shopify then?
So we didn't start on Shopify, but we transitioned to Shopify, which was a great decision. Because at the end of the day, we are becoming increasingly techy as a company, because we're hiring very talented people in the tech department, but we're focusing more on backend and automation. We wouldn't be saying the same things. But in 2020, Shopify does a great job in giving you an e-commerce engine that lets you start in a very easy and very reliable way. You don't have to worry about servers. You don't have to worry about how many people click on your website. You can focus on marketing, sales, and product, which is essentially what you want to focus on if you're building a brand. So Shopify was, I think it's a great choice for removing all the technical hurdles and difficulties in launching a new brand.
Okay.
I think it's the best way to test the idea and test the branding and the communication, the messaging on the market. When you reach a stage where you want to do super advanced stuff and you want to have maybe a headless e-commerce, I think it's completely fine to go off the platform, or maybe just use the e-commerce engine and just go completely off of it on the front end part. But we're talking about, it depends on the size of the project. We're talking about a project that, should have 4 or 5 people in tech only, right? If you want to manage that.
Yeah, I'm saying that, would you say that Shopify's platform really help retail entrepreneurs like yourself to kind of scale their online platform?
I think they go from the very amatorial person that wants to just sell his or her merchandise online. They're very basic.
Yeah.
Up until our stage, more or less, maybe double our size. If you go to companies that are targeting 50 plus million in sales in e-commerce, then those companies might choose to just use one bit of Shopify. But there are also other competitors in the super advanced segment of the market. But I think the in terms of competence, like the very low to up until the stage where you just want to focus on product and marketing, Shopify is perfect.
Okay. So, Enrico, you mentioned how, the idea of Velasca was born. So, but, when you're starting out a business, you hear a lot of things like, it's difficult or this happens or XYZ happens. So would you say that you came across these misconceptions? And then also, I'm interested to know whether you found any of these misconceptions to be actually, true. So they're not misconceptions then, they're somewhat, a person actually faces these obstacles.
Yeah. So yeah, there are a lot of misconceptions. I mean, especially that I had in mind. Number one is the timing, what it takes for the time it takes to do things right is like a number, like a factor, a multiple of what you have in mind, typically. So when you're starting a business, whenever someone talks to me and asks me like, I want to start a business and I want to do this and that, the number one thing I say to them. You just have to bear in mind that you need to be willing to have your face associated with this business for the next 10 years.
For the next 10 years. So that's the starting time that you would give, like 10-year mark.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have to be willing, right? Then it may go faster. You may sell, it may go like, it may take you like 2-3 years. It may take you 5 years. But you have to be willing to be associated with this brand for 10 years, especially if you're starting from scratch, and especially if you're starting with limited financial resources. So it would be a little bit different if you told me, I have, family offices and venture funds that want to give me like 30 million euros to start the business, then probably I wouldn't say 10 years, because I would say, okay, you have financial resources to really do this well from day one and do it fast. But if we're talking about the situation, how we started Velasca, right? Like two guys, two friends, setting up a web shop, setting up a brand. Yeah, 10 years, because the first 2 years will be chaos, especially if it's the first time that you've done this. After 24 months, like you start understanding what works and what doesn't, and then it takes another 3 years to scale. And then, after 5 years, this is already 5 years. After 5 years, this is where the most interesting part happens, because you're actually scaling up. You're not a startup anymore. You're a scale up. So you want to continue, right? Typically, if things go well. So we've been doing this since 2013, so it's 7 years already, and it takes time to build a brand. It takes time to build something.
And like you mentioned before, you're happy with the progress.
I'm very happy with it. Of course, if I started today with a new brand, it would take me half the time.
Yeah.
But also because I would be able to fundraise. I have the traction, I have the track record and the expertise to do it faster. But it wouldn't, like, even if you're a guru, like it's not gonna take you less than 5 years to build a decent brand with decent volumes.
And I came to know that you guys started this during a recession, which I admit, I myself was, very surprised, because this is something that a lot of people find daunting. So
Yeah.
how's that journey like?
Well, it's counterintuitive, but this is actually the best way to start a business, because I'll give you a very practical example. Our supply chain, so the artisans and the craftsmanship, the craftsman shop that we work with, if it had not been a recession, they wouldn't have talked to us, because they would have been busy, like producing for the big brands or producing for their own brands. So in a time of expansion, there's less capacity available in terms of production, and there's also that less talent because companies are hiring. So overall, like, the talent gets hired, right? If you're starting through, like, in a recession, actually, that's the best way to attract talent that maybe is on the market for reasons that are not tied to their competencies and their skills, as well as on the production side, and so it's counterintuitive, but it's actually the best of times. And COVID is
How
another
do you
example.
weigh it out, right? Because you mentioned, okay, so fine, like attracting talent or having a distribution network is kind of good, because people don't have that many businesses to cater to. But then on the financial side, you're already in a recession. So then how do you weigh it out?
Well, this is also tied to our value proposition. So having, like, a more affordable take on high quality shoes in a recession actually plays better than, to consumers than traditional approach, because maybe they don't want to spend 500, 600 euros on a pair of shoes. Maybe they're willing to give it to try a new brand that sells exactly the same product for less than half the price. The only thing that that you should bear in mind is the difficulty to fundraise in a recession, because investors typically go, they go through waves, So there's maybe 6 months prior to the recession, everybody wants to invest in, the sector that you're active in, and then 6 months later, just because something small happens, nobody wants to touch it, right? It's the investors world, with a few exceptions, is very much driven by these waves, right? And so that is a difficulty, I should say. That is a difficulty that is on the market, but I still think it's the best of times to start, and also it's the time when people are more willing to take risks, because if you have a cushy job, right? If you're in a corporate, you're less willing to take the risk and leave it. If things going well, the company gives a bonus and stuff, right? So there's also a thing on a macro scale. I haven't read any papers, but I do believe in there's a macro trend in people going into entrepreneurship more when things get tough.
Right. And how would you define your leadership style to be like? Because you mentioned, like you have all of these elements that you really look for in Velasca. That's your brand identity. And I believe that is something that reflects in your leadership style as well. So if you were kind of to, say it out in one word, what would it be?
Yeah. So I try to be as focused on the what and not the who as possible.
Okay.
So that no matter the person I work with, they understand, the team understands that I'm focused on the output. Mm-hmm. So in terms of leadership, if you can call it that way, in that way, I try to make people understand that, no matter your personality, you have to focus on reaching excellence in whatever you do, and the only way to do that is through passion, and feeling like the project that you're given or the project that you choose to work on is actually yours, and you're not just working for someone, you're working with someone to achieve a result. So both Jacopo and myself, I think, are focused on building it's an environment where we laugh and we joke, and there's a very relaxed approach, and it's not formal at all. But if the output is not at the highest level, we will say it, and there's nothing wrong about it, because the constructive criticism is what is the only way to reach excellence in your job. And I think that's so important, and I try. It's difficult when you grow, but I try to tell this to people. It doesn't matter, it doesn't really matter if you make a mistake. It doesn't really matter if you were not the one to have the idea. But what really matters is that we focus on the common result, and we all want, we all have this approach of bringing to the market the best possible outcome. Right. And it's not just, okay, whatever, this works, let's not fix it, let's not improve it. No, that's not the way. We have to be the best.
And then speaking of growth, if I'm not wrong, did you guys recently open up an office in New York?
Not an office, but we're going to open a shop. No, our office is in Milan. Even though right now we're remote working. Mm-hmm. But we want to open a shop in New York. Unfortunately, it was supposed to open in April, and then the pandemic hit, and we're gonna I think we're gonna postpone it to 2021. Right. Unfortunately.
So how has and again, this is something that I wanted to talk to you about. So how has the recent wave of COVID been for Velasca? So how did you kind of see through this period? And then there's also like a retail boom that is currently we are experiencing it. So how do you think Velasca kind of fits into this scenario?
Yeah, so COVID and the pandemic hit us really hard, because 2019, a lot of our revenues, more 2/3, I should say, of our revenues came from Italy, and Italy's was particularly hit in March and April.
Yeah.
So we went through a cost, focusing on costs and trying to reduce them as much as possible. But the best part about the pandemic is that we realized how fast our business model is to react to the market. Because I mean, we were able to reduce costs so much when the revenues were not there. We had weeks where we had like minus 90% versus 2019, so it was a disaster. But we bounced back really well as soon as the consumer had a more positive attitude towards life and towards more consumer confidence, and they started buying shoes again. I started going out of their apartments, and we're essentially making the same numbers as last year, which is already a great success, because the fashion sector is actually minus 30 to 50%. This year. So we're definitely outperforming the market, and it's just proof of this direct to consumer business model, which is like the way to go for the future. I think what it brought is also a much higher awareness of how the digital world and e-commerce, how important it is for brands. I think a lot of brands, a lot of people knew this already. We've been working on this since 2013, so it's not.
So you have an online and an offline presence, right? So, but
Yeah, both.
Do you think you'd be more inclined to kind of stick to the online presence, the e-commerce platform right now, or do you feel that going forward?
I actually feel like our strategy was already perfect, because selling shoes and handcrafted shoes, if you want to reach a large number of people, you wanna stick to having direct stores,
Right.
but you want to do that as a way to, let's say, monetize or your existing customer base and your existing brand awareness.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to reason in the way that the old retailers used to think about the business. So just like, how many people pass in front of the street, and I'm going to put a store here. It doesn't matter how, I can pay a high rent. I need traffic, right? I need them to bump into my store. That's not the way the world works right now. We actually do acquisition online, and then we have the stores to kind of have those people that saw our products, saw our brand online, and are not willing to buy online because maybe for a number of reasons they're not digitally savvy, or they want to win over the trust factor. They come to our store. So I think that's going to stick. That's going to stay, in the future.
And then what tips would you give to new entrepreneurs in terms of scaling their business, and especially, starting during a recessionary period? Are there any thoughts that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think the lesson that I've learned, and I'm still working on it, so it's not exactly an easy task, is that in order to scale, you have to learn how to delegate and manage teams, because you're not going to scale if you do it all yourself. So there's two distinct phases, I think, in the startup phase and the scale-up phase. They're very different from each other. And in the startup phase, which is at the beginning, you have to be the guy or the girl that knows how to make stuff happen in an effective way. So you're essentially putting on different hats, from marketing to finance to sourcing and everything, to make things happen, and you're actually doing the stuff. You have to have a lot of technical knowledge and a lot of strategic knowledge. Whereas in the scale-up phase, you need to have a skill that is way even more difficult, which is hiring the right people and making them allowing them to express their personality, but in a coherent manner to where you want to go. So this is it's really two different skill sets actually that you need to have. So if some people are listening to this podcast and they are in a scale-up phase, I think the number one thing is write down the procedures, write down the brand DNA, write down whatever makes a different, and then hire the right people for the right position. Right. Which is not an easy task, but delegate to those people, because you kind of need to remove yourself from the operations if you want to scale. Otherwise, you're going to be a bottleneck.
Makes sense. And then lastly, Enrico, we're just moving towards the end of our discussion here. So what's next for Velasca? And you mentioned at the start of the podcast that you're building the technical side of it, the company.
Yeah.
How do you see that integrating with the emerging technologies out there?
So Velasca wants to go abroad and wants to be more tech. So these are the two things that we want to focus on. In terms of going abroad, it's just a matter of time because we had started going abroad already, both online and with our shops. We have a shop in Paris, we have a shop in London, and as I said, we have a shop in New York ready to be open. And we'll open more shops, and we'll continue advertising in different markets. And in terms of tech, we want to kind of automate whatever processes we have internally to allow our team to focus on important stuff and not focus on repetitive tasks. So that's the number one thing that we want to focus on for the future. And then we have another thing, another important growth factor is we kind of want to leverage on the assets that we have, the go-to-market strategy, the insider knowledge, and the supply chain knowledge to launch a new brand, which will be focused on women actually. So kind of have essentially the same value proposition of Velasca, but on the women's sector.
Women's division of it.
With a different brand, yeah, with a strong brand identity on the women's side.
Right, okay. So thank you, Enrico. That's all for our time today. I hope you had a good discussion around it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me.